We've reached the last day of class before we head to Easter. I hope that you guys are anticipating that. I'd like you to tell me one thing besides not having to do anything connected to school that you're most looking forward to over Easter. As you think about that window, being able to celebrate not only the death but the resurrection of Jesus Friday and Sunday, what are you most looking forward to, even about the week off that you get? Um, I know that for some of you, perhaps getting to stay home, but getting to do some other things. Maybe some of you able to get out, up and out. I don't know exactly what all of your breaks are going to look like, but what are you most anticipating or looking forward to about Easter? Last time we were together, we talked about Pearl Harbor and the horror that was going to go along with that. A lot of really hard things that were going to be tied to that. But as we conclude the next day after the attack on the 8th of December, President Roosevelt gathered Congress together and he delivered his famous speech wherein he said, yesterday, December 7th, when the Japanese came and attacked us unprovoked, will be a day that shall live in infamy. Like I said on Monday, I think that it's interesting to consider just how significant that moment was within our history's context, or sorry, within our country's history's context, obviously, but even as we think on a broader scale, what that meant overall. With this attack, the United States is drawn into the Second World War. And instead of us sitting on the sideline, not really doing anything or being less connected, now we're all in. We're going to see the Germans and the Italians jumping on as part of the Axis powers. They said, because the United States and Japan are at war, we're now at war with the United States as well. The United States is drawing completely into the Second World War, and we will, for the next 4 years, be tied down with this conflict. I want to turn our attention to the battle in the Pacific. I think so often we look at the European theater, and rightly so. There's some significant moments, but even as the war is going on, raging in Europe, you're going to see the battle in the Pacific maybe being as significant or more so than what we're going to see in Europe in terms of the death toll. It's going to be a brutal time for America. The Japanese, the attack on Pearl was just the beginning, and so they're going to now turn their attention to the rest of the Pacific. They're going to go after American air bases, trying to now limit our air power, even on the Philippines. And with these attacks, the Japanese basically have now eliminated the air superiority in many ways that America had. The Japanese, again, were going to cut off the legs of the United States. The Japanese, though, said this isn't enough. This is a good beginning, but this is not going to be enough for us. We're not going to be content. We want to now continue to go after these areas. And so they continue to attack other areas kind of in that realm. Not American areas per se, although Guam is going to be a territory. But you got the Philippines, those living on Hong Kong, as well as Guam. You're going to see these areas now capitulating, surrendering to the Japanese. Another really hard moment of the United States and our experience in World War II, at least in the Pacific, happened on the island of Bataan. Some of you guys maybe have heard about this horror, but during a 6-day window, you're going to see the Japanese pushing some of our soldiers, along with some of the Filipinos that were on that island. They captured them and then force them to march across the island. For 6 days, they're going to be force marched across the island. They're not given much food, if any, and there's not going to be a whole lot of rest afforded them. Essentially, the Japanese, I think in many ways, were trying to kill them physically, even by pushing them that hard. And if not through the march, the Japanese also, if anybody said, hey, I need to stop, I don't have enough to keep going, or I need water, whatever, many times the Japanese would either shoot them directly, or the bayonets were on the end of their rifles and they would stab those that stopped. Now, I've heard in the past students have said, well, Mr. Hayward, more than two-thirds were able to make it. That's true. But when you think about overall, 21,000 guys likely over that 6 days dying, I think that you guys can do the math. That's over 3,000 a day. Pretty intense, pretty amazing to think about that many men losing their lives during this push across the island of Bataan. Horrible, horrible moment. Again, the Bataan Death March. Some of you guys perhaps have heard of it, others not. Here are a couple images from that terrible time for the Americans and the Filipinos alike. Over the next few years, the United States is going to engage in what is called island hopping. Um, as we think about this moment, and there are several battles that are going to be kind of woven into this. Iwo Jima, you're going to see Okinawa, Battle of Coral Sea, Battle of Midway, all different battles. And within U.S. history next year, it's possible that you guys might get to look at some of these a little bit more directly. But the goal is for the United States to move closer and closer to Japan. There's going to be a couple of American commanders that are going to be kind of directing this. We're going to see, though, them their goal being to hop from island to island to island. There's so many islands in the Pacific, and the Japanese had taken up residence on many of them, kind of hunkered down, and it was necessary to clear them out one at a time because if you just blitz through and said, hey, we're heading right to Japan, you could get attacked from behind. So it was imperative that they go from island to island to island. But a lot of this fighting was going to be extremely bloody, extremely intense. But even as we think about this time, it's very difficult for America to be sure. But it's not just America that's facing some really hard moments. The Japanese are as well. Their food rations are going to be severely limited as they now try to supply the front lines and give food to soldiers. The people that are living on the main island of Japan and the surrounding islands have very little to eat. You're also going to see them running out of gas or close to it as they now try to keep the war effort moving. The United States knew, and we'll talk about this after break, though, that the most intense fighting would happen on the mainland of Japan, the main island there. If it ever came to fighting on the main island, they knew that's where the stiffest resistance would come. Even though there had been thousands of men that had died in trying to defend these islands up to the mainland of Japan, they knew that that was where the main fight would come one day. They hope it never would, but again, we'll talk about that after break. As we finish things up here, we're going to see this now transitioning to Europe, back to Europe. When we return, we'll talk a little bit more about how that's going to be, some of the significant moments of the fight for Europe. So again, we'll turn the page on the war in the Pacific. A lot of that is in American history, so I'll let you save that for next year. But we're going to be talking about the war in Europe, Russia and England specifically, as we think about then the final attack, at least for this push, into France. I'll see you guys in part 2.